The message came in the middle of the human's long space journey. His small ship was drifting between empty stars, and he was half asleep when the alarm beeped. A signal was reaching him. Weak, broken, but desperate. He leaned closer, his heart beating faster as the words became clear. "Adopt my hungry children and be my mate, human." The man froze. He had traveled many years through the galaxy, but never once had he heard a message like this. Most distress calls asked for food, fuel, or rescue. But this was something else. It was not a normal cry for help. It was a plea filled with sorrow and strange hope. He replayed the message. Again the same voice, soft but trembling. "Adopt my hungry children and be my mate, human." The human sat back in his chair. His name was Daniel, a traveler who never stayed too long in one place. He had seen wars, he had seen planets rise and fall, but he had always walked alone. Now, a widow from an alien race was calling him. Why him? Why a human she had never met? His ship's computer traced the signal. It came from a dying world not far from his route, a planet once green and alive, now marked with scars of battle and silence. Daniel thought for a long moment. Logic told him to ignore it. He had his own journey, his own life. But something in that trembling voice pulled at him. It was the sound of someone who had lost everything and had nowhere left to turn. Against his own better judgment, Daniel changed his course. His ship entered the broken atmosphere, shaking as it passed through storm clouds. Below, he saw ruins of cities, old fire marks, and shadows of machines long destroyed. This was a place of sorrow. He landed near the coordinates. The ground was cracked, the air thin, but there was still life. The building before him looked weak, half fallen, with walls broken and windows shattered. As he stepped out, he heard a faint sound. Crying. Small voices carried through the wind. Inside the ruins, he found her. The widow stood tall but weak, her body thin from hunger. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly even in the dim light. She, world clothes torn from many days of struggle. Her eyes, large and filled with sorrow, locked on him the moment he entered. "You came," she whispered. Her voice was tired, but in it there was relief. Around her, 3 small children huddled, together. Their faces were thin, their arms weak. When they saw Daniel, they did not run, did not hide. They only stared with wide, desperate eyes. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen orphans before, victims of war and hunger, but something about these children felt different. They were silent, almost too weak to speak, but their eyes carried a question. "Will you help us? Or will you leave us too?" The widow stepped closer. "I am alone," she said. "My mate, my husband, died in the war. My people turned away from me. They say I am cursed. They say my children are a burden." Her voice broke, but she continued, forcing out each word. "We are starving. We cannot last another season, and then I saw your ship passing the sky. I sent the only message I could. Adopt my hungry children. Be my mate. Human, I beg you." Daniel did not answer right away. His mind was racing. This was not what he expected. He thought he would find a simple distress call, perhaps someone needing food or water. But this? A widow asking him not only to save her children, but to be part of their family. It felt impossible. He was a traveler, not a father. He had no home, no family of his own. Could he really care for alien children? Could he truly accept the bond of being someone's mate? And yet, as he stood there, he felt something in the air. The children's eyes followed him with quiet hope. The widow's hands trembled as she waited for his answer. It was not a trick. It was not a trap. It was the pure, painful truth of a broken family begging to survive. Outside, thunder rolled through the ruined sky. Shadows moved in the distance, shapes of other creatures wandering the dead city. Danger was not far. Daniel knew if he turned away now, the widow and her children might not live another day. His heart told him something his mind refused to say. You cannot leave them. But before he could speak, the widow fell to her knees, her voice shaking with desperation. Please, human, take us, save them, be their father. If not, they will die. I will die. This is my last wish. Daniel stood frozen. His journey, his freedom, his lonely path, all of it could change in this single moment. The children looked up at him, their hollow eyes shining with tears. The widow bowed her head, waiting for the answer that could mean life or death. Daniel took a deep breath, his heart heavy. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing. He could not walk away. The wind howled through the ruins as he whispered his first words to them. I will not leave you. And with that, the story of the human and the alien widow began. Daniel stood in the broken house, the cold wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. The widow was still kneeling before him, her hands trembling. The 3 alien children clung to her legs, their eyes wide and hollow. Their bodies were thin, almost too fragile to stand, and their stomachs growled with hunger. For a moment, Daniel felt frozen. He had traveled through many worlds, but he had never faced something like this. He had fought pirates, escaped traps, and survived deadly storms, but hunger was the cruelest enemy he had ever seen. One of the children, the smallest, tried to stand. She stumbled forward and almost fell, but Daniel quickly caught her in his arms. Her skin was warm but weak, her breath slow. She looked at him with quiet trust, as if she already believed he could save her. The widow's voice shook as she whispered, They have not eaten for 3 days. There is no food left. No one would share, no one cares. Daniel looked around the room. The shelves were empty, the cupboards broken. A single pot sat in the corner, dry and useless. He had a little food on his ship, dried rations, tasteless, but enough to keep them alive. But 3 starving children? That would not last long. He placed the small child back beside her siblings and knelt down to their level. What are your names? He asked gently. The oldest boy, his eyes dark and serious, spoke first. I am Lior, he said, his voice rough from thirst. He pointed to the smaller girl Daniel had carried. That is Sari, and the middle one is Kale. Kale, the middle child, stared at Daniel without blinking. His expression was a mixture of fear and hope, as if he wanted to trust the human but could not fully believe yet. Daniel nodded slowly. Lior, Sari, Kale, I will remember. The widow's eyes filled with tears. They remember their father every day, she said softly. He was strong, brave, but he is gone, and I cannot feed them alone. She touched her chest with trembling fingers. I send my wish to the sky and you came. You are human, but maybe you are the answer. Daniel swallowed hard. He was no hero. He was just a man wandering the stars, carrying scars of his own. But as he looked at the children, something stirred inside him. A memory of his own past, being hungry once, abandoned with no one to turn to. He had survived, but the pain of that loneliness had never left him. The storm outside rumbled, making the house shiver. Shadows flickered through the broken windows. Strange sounds echoed in the distance. Perhaps wild beasts or worse, scavengers searching for weakness. Time was running out. Daniel stood. I have some food on my ship, he said firmly. It is not much, but it will help. Come with me, Thor. Widow hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the window. It is dangerous, she whispered. Raiders patrol the ruins. If they see us, Daniel interrupted. If you stay here, your children will starve. If you come with me, they have a chance. The widow looked down at her children. Their eyes were fixed on her, waiting for her decision. At last, she nodded, slowly. Daniel moved quickly. He carried Sari in his arms, while Lior held his mother's hand and Kale clung to her side. Together, they stepped into the broken streets of the ruined city. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Broken towers leaned against the sky like wounded giants. Every step echoed, every shadow seemed alive. Daniel kept his hand close to his blaster. He was not going to let anything touch them. As they moved through the ruins, Sari stirred in his arms. She looked up at him with tired eyes and whispered one word. Father. Daniel froze for a moment. The word hit him like a knife and a gift at the same time. He was not their father, but in her weak, hungry heart she had already given him that place. He tightened his grip on her and whispered, I will protect you. They reached the edge of the city, where Daniel's ship waited. Just as the door began to open, a shout rang out from the shadows. Figures appeared. 5 raiders, thin and cruel, with glowing eyes and sharp weapons. The widow gasped, pulling her children behind her. The raiders laughed. Food, one of them hissed. And look, children, easy trade, easy profit. Daniel stepped forward, placing Sari gently back into her mother's arms. His voice was low, calm, but filled with fire. They are under my protection now. The raiders sneered. One raised his weapon. You think one human can stop us? Daniel's hand moved fast. His blaster glowed, ready for battle. His eyes locked on them with a cold promise. Try me. The air grew heavy with silence. The widow's heart raced. The children clung to her, their small hands trembling. This was no longer just a question of hunger. This was a fight for survival. And in that moment, Daniel understood something. He was no longer just a traveler. He was a shield, a father, a mate perhaps. The galaxy might laugh at the thought of a human protecting an alien widow and her children, but Daniel did not care. He had made his choice. The ruined city was silent again. The raiders had fled, their leader falling to Daniel's blaster fire and the rest escaping into the storm. The sound of their footsteps faded into the darkness, leaving only the howl of the wind and the beating of Daniel's heart. He lowered his weapon slowly, his eyes scanning the shadows one last time. Then he turned back. The widow was holding her children close, her chest rising and falling with fear. Her eyes met Daniel's, wide with disbelief. You fought them, she whispered. You risked your life for us. Daniel shook his head. I didn't risk it, I chose it. They weren't going to take you. The children clung to their mother, but their eyes were on him. To them, he was no longer just a stranger from the sky. He was something more, a shield, a protector, maybe even the hope they thought would never come. Daniel motioned toward his ship. Come, you need food, shelter. We can't stay here. They moved quickly through the ruins, and at last, the door of his ship sealed behind them. Safe. For now. Inside, Daniel opened a small metal case and pulled out food rations. Dry bars, tasteless, but enough to keep them alive. He placed them gently in the children's hands. Their eyes lit up as if he had given them treasure. They chewed slowly, savoring every bite, their weak bodies trembling with relief. The widow did not eat. She only watched them, tears sliding down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. You gave them life again. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He had done what he could. Maybe tomorrow he would leave them somewhere safe. Maybe he would continue his journey. That was the plan he told himself. But deep down, he knew nothing would be so simple anymore. When the children finally drifted into sleep, curled together, on a soft blanket Daniel had laid out, the widow stepped forward. Her voice was soft but strong. You saved them, and you saved me. But I must ask you more. Daniel frowned. More? Her eyes shone in the dim light. Be their father. Be my mate. The words hung in the air like a heavy stone. Daniel stared at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. You want me to be your mate? He asked slowly. She nodded. Yes. Not just for me. For them. They need a father. They need someone who will fight for them, protect them, teach them. You came when no one else would. You fought when others turned away. You are human, yes, but maybe Maybe that is what they need most. Daniel's chest tightened. He had faced death many times, but this was a different kind of battle. He was not afraid of raiders, or storms, or even hunger. But the thought of becoming a father, of binding himself to a family that was not his own, that shook him. He looked at the sleeping children. Lior's face was calm now, no longer hardened by fear. Kale had curled his small hand around Siri, as if protecting her even in dreams. They were so fragile, so innocent, he whispered, almost to himself. I'm not a father. I don't even know how to be one. The widow stepped closer. Her pale blue skin glowed faintly in the ship's soft lights. She placed her hand gently on his arm. You are already one, she said softly. When you held Siri, she called you father. When you fought the raiders, you stood as one. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to stay. Daniel pulled away, pacing the small cabin. His mind raced. He had lived his life alone, never tying himself to anyone. Freedom was all he had known. But freedom had also left him empty, wandering from world to world without meaning. He turned back to her. You don't even know me. I'm a traveler. A fighter, I don't have a home. The widow's eyes met his. Then make us your home. Her words cut through him like a blade. They were not spoken in desperation, but in truth. She was offering him not just a role, but a place where he belonged. But before Daniel could answer, the ship's alarm beeped. The screen lit up with red. Warnings. Movement outside. Raiders again? Or something worse? The widow's face paled. They will not stop, she whispered. They know I am alone. They know my children are weak. They will come again and again until we are gone. Daniel's fists clenched. The galaxy was cruel. He knew that well. But now, cruelty had a target. This widow, these children. And he could not walk away. He turned off the alarm and looked at her with steady eyes. If I do this, if I become what you ask, it won't be easy. I'm not gentle. I don't know how to raise children. But if I stay, I will fight. I will protect them. I will protect you. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. The first real smile he had seen on her face. That is all I ask? Daniel sat down, exhausted, his thoughts heavy. He had no clear answer yet. But as the widow returned to her children and lay beside them, her arm wrapped around them, Daniel realized the choice was already pulling him. He looked at the small family huddled together. Alone, they would die. But with him, maybe they would live, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt the weight of belonging pressing on his heart. The ship was quiet, but Daniel could not sleep. The widow and her children were resting together on the blanket, their soft breathing filling the small cabin. The storm outside had eased, but Daniel knew silence like this was dangerous. Silence meant enemies could be hiding, waiting, moving closer. He sat in the pilot's chair, eyes fixed on the scanner. Red blips moved slowly across the edge of the screen. Raiders. They had not given up. They were circling, hunting. Daniel gripped the armrest. He could leave now, blast into the sky and vanish. That would be the safest choice for him. But then he glanced back at the sleeping children. Their faces were thin, but peaceful. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, they looked safe. If he left now, that peace would end forever. The widow stirred and rose quietly, stepping beside him. Her pale blue skin glowed faintly in the dim light. She looked at the screen and her face tightened. They are coming, she whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, they won't stop until they take you. She lowered her head. This is why I sent my message. Alone, I cannot fight them. Alone, my children will die. She turned her eyes to him. But with you. Her words trailed off, heavy, with unspoken hope. Daniel didn't answer. He checked his blaster, then the small knife strapped to his leg. He had fought many battles, but this one felt different. It wasn't about survival anymore, it was about protecting something fragile, something worth more than his own life. The widow touched his arm lightly. "They will test you, human. They will test if you are truly one of us." Before Daniel could reply, the scanner beeped louder. The red blips were closing in fast. The raiders were spreading out, surrounding the ruins. He rose to his feet. "Stay with the children. Keep the door sealed. If they get through, hide them under the storage bay." The widow caught his sleeve. "And you? What if you fall?" Daniel gave her a hard look. "Then you run. You keep them alive." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. He stepped outside, the cold wind slashing across his face. The ruins loomed tall and broken around him. The night was alive with distant footsteps and cruel laughter. Then came the voice. "Human," it shouted from the shadows. "You think you can steal what is ours? Hand over the widow, hand over her spawn. Do this and we let you live." Daniel raised his blaster, his voice steady. "They don't belong to you, and they never will." Dark shapes moved closer. Raiders thin and cruel, armed with blades and guns. Their eyes glowed red under their helmets. One by one, they spread across the street, cutting off escape. Daniel's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. Behind him, the widow and her children watched from the narrow window of the ship. The leader of the raiders, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His voice was like a growl. "You are one man, one fragile human. Do you think you can stop us, all?" Daniel lifted his blaster. "I don't need to stop all of you, just enough to make the rest afraid." The raiders laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the ruins. Then, without warning, the first one charged. Daniel fired. The blaster lit up the dark, striking the raider square in the chest. He fell hard, his weapon clattering to the ground. Silence followed for one heartbeat. Then the others roared in fury. They rushed forward. Daniel fought like a storm. His blaster cracked again and again, each shot precise, each strike pushing the raiders back. But there were too many. They spread around him, forcing him to move, forcing him to dodge behind broken walls. One raider lunged close with a blade. Daniel blocked with his arm, pain burning across his skin, then slammed the knife from his belt into the raider's side. The enemy fell, but two more took his place. Inside the ship, the widow clutched her children tight. Leor pressed his face against the glass, watching Daniel fight. His young voice whispered, "He is not afraid." But Daniel was afraid, not for himself, for them. Every time he stumbled, every time a raider's weapon passed close, he thought of the children's hungry faces, of Siri calling him father, of the widow's desperate plea. He could not fall, not tonight. The leader stepped forward at last, his eyes blazing. He raised a massive rifle, its barrel glowing with deadly power. Daniel ducked behind a stone wall just as the blast struck, shattering rock into dust. The widow gasped inside the ship. "No!" But then Daniel rose again, covered in ash, eyes burning with fire. He aimed carefully, steady despite the chaos, and he fired. The leader staggered, hit in the shoulder. He howled in rage, dropping his weapon. The other raiders froze, their courage shaken. Daniel's voice cut through the night like steel. "Leave now, or the next shot ends him." The raiders hesitated. Fear crept into their glowing eyes. One by one, they began to back away, dragging their wounded leader with them. The darkness swallowed them as they vanished into the ruins, their laughter gone. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He turned back toward the ship. Through the window, he saw the widow's tear-filled eyes and the children's small faces pressed against the glass. They had seen everything. They had seen him fight not as a wanderer, but as something more. He stepped inside. The children ran to him, wrapping their thin arms around his legs. The widow stood silent, her hands trembling. Daniel dropped to one, knee resting a hand on Lear's shoulder. His voice was firm. "They'll be back, stronger, maybe smarter, but I'll be ready." The widow's lips parted. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but no words came, only tears. for in that moment, she realized her desperate wish was no longer just a plea. It was becoming real. The human was no longer a stranger. He was becoming theirs. The night was heavy with silence after the battle. Smoke drifted through the ruins and the ground still carried the smell of burned metal. Daniel sat against the wall of his ship, his breathing rough, his blaster heavy in his hand. He had fought many fights before, but this one had left his body aching in ways he had not felt in years. Inside the ship, the children were still awake, their eyes wide and frightened. Leor sat near the window, watching Daniel like a shadow waiting for light. Ciri clung to her mother's arm, while Cale hid his face, too shaken to speak. The widow came out quietly. Her bare feet touched the cracked stone as she stepped into the cold night. Her eyes searched Daniel's face. "You cannot stay here," she whispered. "The raiders will come again, stronger. They will bring more." Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow. "I know." Her gaze moved to her children. "If they find us here, it will be the end." Daniel looked at her and then at the ruins around them. She was right. The city was broken, its walls filled with holes. It was no longer a home, only a trap. Staying here meant waiting to die. He stood slowly. "We move tonight, before they regroup." The widow's eyes widened. "Now?" "But the children, they can walk," Daniel interrupted firmly. "If not, I'll carry them. Staying here is death. Moving is the only chance we've got." The widow swallowed hard but nodded. She trusted him now. Daniel moved quickly, gathering what little supplies the ship held. Blankets, food rations, a small water pack. He strapped his knife to his belt and checked his blaster one more time. Then he crouched in front of the children. "Listen to me," he said, his voice calm but strong. "We have to leave. It will be dark. It will be cold. You must stay close to me and your mother. Do not make a sound. If I tell you to hide, you hide. Do you understand?" Leor nodded first. Kyle hesitated, then nodded too. Ciri only clung to Daniel's arm, whispering, "I will be good, Father." The word struck him again, deep in his chest. He said nothing, only lifted her into his arms. They stepped into the night. The ruins stretched endlessly, shadows shifting with every flicker of the moonlight. The wind carried strange noises, howls of distant beasts, the creak of falling metal, and somewhere far off, the harsh laugh of raiders searching. Daniel led them through the broken streets, his steps silent, his eyes scanning every corner. The widow walked behind him, holding Leor and Cale's hands. Together they looked like a small, fragile line moving through a world of giants. Every sound made the children flinch. Every shadow made the widow tighten her grip. But Daniel moved, forward, steady, never stopping. At one point they passed a collapsed tower. The ground was littered with twisted steel. Daniel raised his hand, signaling them to wait. He crouched low, listening. Voices. 2 raiders were nearby, walking slowly, their boots scraping against the stone. "The human killed 3 of ours," one growled. "The leader swears he will take his head." The other laughed. "The widow is worth more alive. Her children too. We'll find them. It's only a matter of time." The widow's face paled. Cale's breath hitched, but Daniel pressed a finger to his lips. He crouched lower, waiting. The raiders passed, their voices fading into the storm. Daniel exhaled slowly and waved them forward. They kept moving. Hours passed. The moon sank lower and the ruins gave way to rocky hills. Their path was hard, but safer than the city. The children grew tired, their steps slowing. Ciri's head rested against Daniel's chest, her small hands gripping his jacket. At last, when the horizon began to glow faintly with the coming dawn, Daniel found a cave hidden in the cliffs. He motioned them inside. It was dark but dry, a safe shelter for the moment. He laid Ciri gently on a blanket, then helped the widow settle the others. The children collapsed quickly, too tired to stay awake. The widow sat beside them, stroking their hair, whispering soft words in her language. Her eyes lifted to Daniel. "You saved them again," she said. Her voice was full of wonder but also fear. "Why?" You could have left us. Daniel leaned against the cave wall, his face hard. Because I couldn't. Not after hearing your cry. Her gaze softened. Then you understand. You are not just a traveler anymore. You are part of us. Daniel looked away, staring at the entrance of the cave. He wanted to deny it, to tell her he was only protecting them until they reached safety. But deep inside, he knew it was no longer true. He had crossed a line the moment Siri called him father. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes, distant shouts, the sound of engines. The raiders were still searching. The danger was not gone. Daniel tightened his grip on his blaster and whispered to himself, "They won't touch them. Not while I'm still breathing." The widow heard his words. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope stronger than fear. She looked at him and silently she repeated her wish. Be their father. Be my mate. And in the cold cave, as dawn painted the sky with pale light, Daniel realized that his escape was not only from the raiders, it was from his old life. The night had forced them to flee, but it had also tied them together forever. The cave was silent except for the sound of children sleeping. Their small breaths filled the air, soft and steady. For the first time since Daniel had met them, they were not crying, not trembling, not staring at him with hollow eyes. They were simply resting, their thin arms wrapped around each other like roots clinging to soil. Daniel sat near the entrance, watching the horizon turn gold. Dawn had arrived, but with it came no safety. The raiders were still out there, hunting. He knew they would not stop, not until the widow and her children were theirs. The widow moved quietly to his side. Her pale blue skin glowed faintly in the morning light. She studied his face, seeing the scars of many battles, the lines of exhaustion, but also the fire that still burned in his eyes. You have done more for us in one night, she whispered, than my own people have done since the war ended. Daniel didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the valley below. They abandoned you. Yes, she said softly. When my mate died, they turned away. They said we were cursed. They said a widow and her children were too heavy a burden. No one wanted to share food. No one wanted to fight for us. We became ghosts in our own home. Daniel clenched his jaw. He had seen cruelty in many forms, but abandoning children to hunger was something he could never accept. He turned to her at last. Then they're not worth remembering. These children deserve better. The widow's eyes glistened with tears. And you, a human, a stranger, gave them what my own people would not. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I just did what needed to be done. But she shook her head. No, you did more. You stayed. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then a small voice broke it. Father. Daniel turned sharply. Siri had woken, her small eyes blinking against the light. She sat up and crawled into his lap, curling against his chest as if she belonged there. The word echoed again. Father. Daniel froze, his arms stiff, but slowly, carefully, he wrapped them around her. She was warm, fragile, but in her embrace there was no fear, only trust. The widow watched with tears streaming down her face. She has chosen you, she whispered. Daniel said nothing, but inside, something shifted. He had never wanted family, never sought it. But now, with this small child in his arms, he felt a weight and a warmth he had never known before. The other two children stirred. Lior rubbed his eyes, while Kale stretched and sat up. They saw their sister in Daniel's arms and crept closer. Lior, always the serious one, studied Daniel's face. Will you leave us? He asked. His voice was steady, but beneath it was a river of fear. Daniel hesitated. He could lie. He could say he would stay only until danger passed. But the look in Lior's eyes demanded truth. No, Daniel said at last. His voice was rough, but certain. I won't leave you. Kyle's lips curved into the first real smile Daniel had seen on him. Lior's shoulders eased and he nodded as if accepting Daniel's words as law. The widow placed her hand over her mouth, holding back a sob. Her children had found hope again. And it was because of this human. Daniel knew what was happening. He was no longer just a protector. He was becoming something deeper, something permanent. He was crossing a line he could never step back from. And strangely, he did not fear it. The moment was broken by a distant sound, the faint hum of engines. Daniel's head snapped toward the valley. On the horizon, black shapes moved. Raider, ships, they're searching again, he muttered. The widow's face turned pale. They won't stop until they find us. Daniel placed Siri gently down and stood. Then we stay ahead of them. We move again when night falls, but until then, you rest. The children need strength. He spent the day preparing. He scouted the cliffs, set small traps near the cave entrance, and checked his blaster again and again. The widow helped, gathering dry plants for food and water from stone cracks. But every time Daniel passed the children, their eyes followed him. They no longer looked at him like a stranger. They looked at him like family. When night returned, the family gathered around a small fire deep in the cave. Daniel shared what little food they had, breaking it into pieces and handing it to the children first. They ate slowly, but their faces carried quiet joy. Siri leaned against him, her head resting on his arm. Kale sat beside him, asking small questions in a curious voice, about stars, about his ship, about why humans wandered. And Lior, though still guarded, sat close enough that Daniel could feel his trust beginning to grow. The widow sat across from him, her eyes locked on his. She did not need to speak. Her gaze told him everything, her gratitude, her hope, and the unspoken bond forming between them. As the fire crackled, Daniel finally allowed himself a small breath of peace. For one night, they were not running. For one night, they were a family. But outside, in the dark hills, Raider scouts crept closer, their red eyes glowing in the night. The bond had been formed, but the test of that bond was only beginning. The fire in the cave had burned down to glowing embers. The children slept close together, warm under the blankets Daniel had given them. The widow sat nearby, her eyes heavy but unwilling to close. Daniel, as always, kept watch at the mouth of the cave, his blaster resting across his knees. The night outside was quiet, but Daniel trusted silence even less than noise. He had seen too many battles begin in moments like this, when the world seemed safe, when the enemy waited for him to let down his guard. A faint sound drifted through the darkness, not the roar of raider engines, not the growl of beasts. It was softer. Footsteps. Careful, slow, and deliberate. Daniel rose instantly, blaster aimed at the shadows. "Who's there?" A figure stepped forward, hands raised high. "Peace. Do not shoot." The voice was smooth, steady. A tall alien emerged from the dark, dressed in worn clothes but without weapons in his hands. His skin carried the same pale glow as the widow's, though his eyes were sharp and calculating. "The widow," gasped softly. "Darren." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You know him?" She nodded slowly, rising to her feet. "He was a neighbor. Before the war. Before." Her voice trembled. "I thought you were gone." The man smiled faintly. "Many are gone, but not me. I survived, and I heard of your trouble. Raiders, hunger, your children left without protection." His gaze shifted to Daniel, studying him like a hawk. "And then I heard of a human who fights for you." Daniel kept his blaster steady. "And why are you here?" Darren spread his hands wider. "To help. The raiders grow bold. Alone you will not last. But I know safe paths through the mountains. I know where water flows and where they dare not go. Come with me, and you will live." The widow's eyes filled with tears. "Darren, if it is true, then you are an answer to my prayers." But Daniel did not lower his weapon. Something about the man felt wrong. His words were smooth, but his eyes were too sharp, too cold. He had seen men like this before, survivors who helped only when it served themselves. "We don't need your help," Daniel said flatly. Darren's smile did not fade. "You think you can fight raiders forever? You think one human can protect a widow and 3 hungry children across this wasteland? No, human. You are strong, but you are not enough. Not alone." The widow stepped between them, her voice urgent. "Please stop, he speaks truth. We cannot fight forever. If there is even a chance he knows a safe place, should we not listen?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at the sleeping children. They deserved safety. They deserved more than running every night. Finally, he lowered his blaster, but his eyes never left Darren. "One wrong move, and I end you." Darren only bowed his head. "Fair." The next morning, they set out. Darren led them through narrow paths hidden by cliffs, his steps confident as if he had walked them many times. The children followed quietly, though Cale glanced at Daniel often, sensing his unease. Hours passed. The sun rose high, and the group stopped by a stream to drink. The children laughed softly as they touched the water, their spirits lifting for the first time in days. The widow smiled at them, but Daniel stayed apart, his eyes fixed on Darren. Something gnawed at him. The man's story had no cracks, but it was too smooth, too perfect. Survivors did not smile so easily. Survivors carried scars, anger, fear. But Darren looked too calm, too practiced. That night they camped beneath a stone arch. The children slept quickly, tired from the long walk. The widow spoke with Darren in low tones, asking about the path ahead. Daniel pretended to rest, but his ears stayed sharp. "You said safe?" the widow whispered. "Yes," Darren replied smoothly. "There is a camp hidden in the valley. Strong walls, plenty of food. Others like us live there. You and your children will be safe." "And the human?" she asked softly. Darren's voice lowered, but Daniel caught every word. "He is dangerous. He fights well, yes, but he is not one of us. He will bring more raiders with his presence. He is a problem." The widow's breath caught. "No, he saved us. He is our protector." "Protectors become threats," Darren said coldly. "I will take you to safety. But when we arrive, the human must leave, or he must fall." Daniel's eyes snapped open. The words cut through him like ice. He had suspected betrayal, but now he had heard it clear. Darren was no savior. He was a vulture circling prey. Daniel rose silently, his blaster in hand. He stepped out of the shadows, his voice low and sharp. "So that's your plan?" The widow spun around, her eyes wide. "Daniel." Darren's calm smile faltered, but only for a moment. "You were meant to hear. Yes, human. You are strong, but you are not needed. The widow and her children will survive without you." Daniel aimed the blaster straight at him. "They are not yours to decide, and if you try to touch them, I'll end you." The widow's face twisted with conflict. She had wanted to believe Darren, to believe safety was possible. But Daniel's voice carried the weight of truth. He had never lied, never promised more than he could give. The air grew heavy, the fire crackling between them. Darren's hand twitched toward the knife hidden at his belt. Daniel's voice was steel. "Try it." The widow stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Darren, go. You are not welcome here." His eyes turned cold, his smile vanishing. "So you choose him, a human, over one of your own?" She lifted her chin. "Yes." For the first time, Darren's mask broke. Hatred burned in his eyes, but he said nothing more. He turned sharply and vanished into the night, his footsteps fading into the shadows. The widow's knees weakened and she sank beside her sleeping children. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I almost believed him." Daniel lowered his blaster, his jaw tight. "He'll be back. Betrayers always come back." He looked at the children, peaceful in their dreams. Then at the widow, her eyes shining with guilt and trust. He knew the battle was far from over. The raiders were a danger, But now betrayal from within their own kind had become another shadow chasing them, and Daniel swore he would never let it reach them.